Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Meso. Today we're going to continue the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and obviously it's been about 36 hours, and that means Robert, or FPGAZumSpass, is back with a new Nintendo 64 core. There were a few issues in the VI implementation on his previous core, so he rewrote about 25% of that entire implementation to give us a much better image on the Nintendo 64 in and of itself. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But as of the last update, a lot of things had improved, but there is a few games where there were some issues in scaling or otherwise, and Rayman 2 was one of those games. So Robert went back in and said he wrote a quarter of that VI implementation over again to fix some of these issues. And going back into Rayman 2, this is the best it's ever looked on the core. All of the graphics are here, all of the text is perfect, all of the sound is good. This is just Rayman 2. And with the new VI implementation and that quarter rewrite, all of the scaling issues and little bits of weirdness in the image are 100% just taken care of. And this is a game that we've been talking about since the core started. It used to not boot, then it would boot, but the text boxes would be completely missing or corrupted. Now as you run around, it's really hard to distinguish this between original hardware. I have all the effects on, dithering, all of the texture filtering, all of the blur that we currently have. So this is as close to a Nintendo 64 image as you can get on the current core. The only thing that this does that I fixed in post is it is slightly off center. The HDMI signal will push the image a little bit to the left, so I have recropped that in post. So if you do see any centering issues with Rayman 2, it is known about, and that is why. But this game is just such a fun platformer, and seeing it again on the core, it is wild how quickly this game has improved. If there are any graphical glitches in the image whatsoever, I did not see them during my gameplay captures, nor in editing, but if you see anything below, leave me a comment. And just so you guys are aware, there's going to be some user request tests in this video as well, so if you have tests for new games, leave them down below and I will definitely get to them. The only problem with Rayman 2 is, like every game of its era, it has that anxiety-inducing underwater area. I think this is why most kids in the 90s probably ended up with anxiety as adults. They had to deal with oxygen underwater. It's never been my favorite mechanic, but it is here in Rayman. And as we just move around, this looks amazing with all the effects turned on. It is a 10 out of 10 image on the current core. Now moving over to a game that has seen improvements and you guys keep asking about, this is Episode 1 Racer, and it is again just looking really good currently. Do be aware that depending on how you capture footage or output this on your MiSTer, you're going to get an image that is going to be smaller than the full screen. That is just down to the resolution modes the Nintendo 64 uses, and that will change in the future, but I have scaled this in post to fit the entire image. But again, watching this game in motion with the current VI implementation, and if you haven't watched the videos before, VI just stands for Visual Interface, this is looking absolutely gold. The sense of motion, all of the polygons, the textures, the heads-up display, the music, this is just perfect in my eyes. I can't see anything glitchy in this capture whatsoever. Now I would let you listen to some Star Wars music as a sound example, but every time I try to do that, I get hit with a copyright flag because the YouTube universe and Disney do not want you to hear it. But just be aware, if you play this game, the sound is absolutely clear, and I'll give you some new sound samples in just a bit. But again, this is a game that you can just 100% pick up and play on the current MiSTer core. I went through all 3 of the courses in the opening of the game before you unlock any new ones. They played correctly, there was no freezing, no graphical glitches, nothing whatsoever. And I totally understand why people keep asking to see this retested. It is one of the classic racing games on the Nintendo 64, and if you're a huge Star Wars fan, it definitely carries nostalgia. But like I say pretty much every video, I have no nostalgia for Star Wars whatsoever. Not saying it's not a great series of movies, television shows, and games. It just never hooked me as a kid, so I play them just as games. I really don't know much about the universe. But if you look at the screen right now, all of the different colors, that skybox with the dithering, with the blur, with all the texture filtering, just goes to make such an incredible image on the current implementation of the core. This is just so fun to see, and it was merely like a month, maybe 5 weeks ago, that this game barely even worked whatsoever, so it's seen vast improvements, and I 100% get why you want to see more of it. Now, a game that has seen improvements from the current core is going to be The World Is Not Enough. This had some scaling issues, and it also had some screen tearing issues in certain modes. That has 100% been fixed, and you can see here, this is just looking great. And this is going to be our first sound example as well, because it's got some really good music. So go ahead and listen for like 35-40 seconds, and I'll come back and show you more games that work and have been improved.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
Perfect sound on that one. The only issue with it is the gunshot sound effect is too loud, but that has nothing to do with the core. That's in the game, and I've always thought the developers prioritize that sound effect a little bit too high, and it ends up being slightly higher on the waveform than I like it to, so I actually drop that sound sample down about 5 decibels. But as we run around, the first level in the world is not enough. Everything is just looking so good. The blur on the wall, the texture filtering. This is definitely a game where I think it actually helps to have all of those features turned on. And I know pretty much every video I've been talking about team blur, team not blur, but tell me down below what effects you're using. I'm curious if you have the entire suite on, or if you're picking and choosing, or if you've turned absolutely everything off. I'm always wondering what you guys do, but the great thing about the core is it gives us so many different options. We can really play around and see what we like, and that's always a good thing. But speaking of first-person shooters on the Nintendo 64, everyone keeps talking about Doom 64 and asking me to retest it, so that's what we're doing right now. I'm going to go through the entire introductory sequence so you can get a sense of how that works, then we'll get in the game in just a moment. But as of the current core, these red boxes around all of the sprites still persist, and it is really interesting just to see that. It just means something isn't currently implemented in the core, or there's a bug to be fixed to get those sprites to not have those red bounding boxes around them. But I've always loved this kind of Doom logo in 3D crawl around that we see at the beginning of the game, and Doom 64 is so incredibly unique as far as a Doom entry is concerned. Now hopefully once this starts working completely, we can start playing the patched ROM where it actually fixes the darkness and brightness, because that was actually a mistake. They sent the wrong version of the game to replication. It was never supposed to be as dark as this. You'll see here that we get the Doom logo in, we get another red bounding box, but it's the funny thing is when you actually get into game, and that's why I haven't shown this for a bit, you're going to see it's incredibly difficult to see anything. That is just the Doom 64 experience, but apparently our punch is so hard it crashes the entire game. That's basically as far as you can get into the current implementation of Doom 64. Now moving back to Star Wars Rogue Squadron, a game I get asked to retest all the time, there is some improvements in the title screen, and that text below used to be a little bit buggy, and overall with all of the different VI implementations, this game is looking even better, and it is one of the heavy hitters on the Nintendo 64 because Factor 5, like Rare, was able to get performance out of the Nintendo 64 hardware that was definitely impressive for its time. And as we're flying around in the open here with this X-Wing, or at least I think it's an X-Wing, if I'm wrong, I'm sure I'll hear about it below, it is just such a fun view, whether you're in the cockpit mode or behind the actual ship itself, and this is where all those different VI implementations, all the texture filtering, go to make an extremely pleasing image on the current MiSTer core. If you look at the skybox, you will see the dithering pattern, but here it seems to blend into the background and be much finer, and it helps with the gradient from the sandiness of those browns up into the blue of the sky. It's just such a fun game to pilot the ship around and see everything on screen at once and shoot at your opponent, whether you're using real hardware or the current core, and this just looks absolutely outstanding in my opinion. Flying through the small village here, you can see from the bottom of the screen all the way up to the blue in the sky, that gradient really does work with the current visual imaging we have on the core, and of course the gameplay matches. And this is a game I've at least gotten through the second stage. I don't know if you can complete it yet or not. I haven't heard anyone doing it, but it's one that you can 100% check out. Just be aware that there are still some bugs, at least in the menus. If we go to this little text scroll here, there is some garbage at the bottom of the screen, and I did scale this in post as well. It was about a 1.4 scale on both the X and Y axis constrained, so if you're playing this over HDMI, you might see an image that is smaller than it should be, but again, that's just some of the resolution changing in different modes the Nintendo 64 has. But as far as the visual imaging quality in the game is concerned, this is just a 10 out of 10. Of course, we still have more things in the VI pipeline that have not yet been introduced to the core, but something tells me we might be back tomorrow with another video, or at least maybe on Thursday. Now let's take a look at Densha Day Go. This is a game that also had a lot of issues with textures and other things that has definitely been 100% improved on the current core. I'm not saying everyone loves this game, but the people that love it absolutely do. It is one of the stranger series from Taito, and I do own an arcade board for it just to play around, but we did get a version on Nintendo 64, and the audio quality has improved since the last time I checked it out as well. So go ahead and listen for like 35 seconds, and I'll be right back.
第三兵卒 進行。第二兵則進行。
Obviously, that's not really a soundtrack, but it is some digitized voice actors there, as well as the trained sound effects. And last time I played this game, that sounded a lot worse. I didn't even give you a sound sample for it. But again, also the last time we played this game, the graphics definitely has some corruption. So if you are a big fan of virtual trains and you want to play Densha de Go on the Nintendo 64 core, you 100% can. Just be prepared for a very difficult and confusing game. I have never been able to figure out what this game is asking of me, and that's because it is all in Japanese and I know nothing about trains. Now, taking a look at the introductory sequence to Donkey Kong 64, this didn't used to render correctly, but now the Nintendo 64 hopping logo and the Rare logo are 100% how you would expect them to be. And last time we took a look at this intro as well, it was a few cores ago, and there were some sound issues where the sound would drop out or it wouldn't sync. Now all of this intro is exactly in sync as of like maybe 2 weeks ago, and that's just incredible. I wish I could let you listen to the Donkey Kong 64 rap, but after the Super Mario movie, this 100% throws up another flag of music I'm not allowed to use. But as far as how this is drawing to the screen, this looks identical to real hardware, outside of being slightly less blurry because all of VI isn't done yet. And this is such a fun game on the core, and everyone always wants to see it, so I'll definitely play more in the future. But I really wanted to emphasize the intro with the DK rap here, because if you play the current core, listen to all the lyrics, they 100% sync up with all of the different emphasizations on the sing-along part at the bottom. Basically, you can do DK rap karaoke, which is 100% not something you should do, but you can do in the current core because everything does sync up. And I just can't believe this was a thing back in the day. The DK rap is absolutely hilarious. It's one of those weird moments in Nintendo 64 history, but every time I hear it, I know I'm going to get to play Donkey Kong 64, and at least I think that's a good thing. Tell me down below whether or not you like this game. Some people hate it because of the collectathon nature of it. Honestly, I just play it until I finish it and leave it alone, don't collect everything, and that's how I enjoy it. But this is just so incredible to see. It uses so many fun colors. You have this spotlight effect. You have different pseudo lighting effects when Cranky Kong comes on screen. This is perfect in my eyes. I don't see anything wrong with anything happening here. But if you see anything at all down below, tell me about it, because it takes a lot of eyes to spot all the different differences. And I do love when you guys notice something I don't, because even I get to go back in, look at it, and see what's going on. But honestly, DK Rap's still one of the stranger moments in video game history, but I do love it. And as we get into the title screen here, with this little vignetting that it makes it look like it's on a television, everything in this game just looks accurate, and I definitely want to get further into it and show you some more levels. But leave me a comment down below and tell me the next game you want me to see retest, because there's a ton to talk about. Now, in further increases in performance, World Driver Championship here with the new VI reimplementation is definitely looking better. It is not my favorite racing game on the Nintendo 64 because it definitely hews more towards the sim aspect versus being an arcade racer, and I'm always going to be an arcade racing fan at heart. But this definitely does look better. You will see if you look to the left and right hand side of the screen, especially when we see buildings, some of the textures start changing a little bit. This still has a couple visual glitches that I'm sure will be addressed in future cores, so it'll be a great example to look at, because those, when they go away, will look much better. But this is a game that didn't used to work up until like 2 cores ago, which was honestly probably midweek last week. That's how fast this moves, and it is here. It's great, and it is your next sound sample for the soundtrack as well. Go ahead and listen for like 30 seconds, and I'll be right back with more games that work. Now speaking of games that air quotes work, everyone keeps asking me to test Bust a Move, and that is because this has one of these stranger visual glitches currently. It looks like you're playing an Atari 2600 game, but it's 100% playing in the background. It's kind of like a Pong look to it, but it's actually really visually interesting. This is just because something either isn't implemented or there's still a bug, and this is one of the more interesting things going on with the current core. But everyone wanted to see this game running, and now you know it looks like this. If you can actually beat a level, I would be hyper surprised. And just to cover all my bases, everyone always asks for Killer Instinct Gold on every single core test, and it's been a few times since I retested it, and honestly I did get further than I did before. Some people on previous cores have reported that they've been able to actually get into the game. I've never gotten into the game before it freezes, but right now I actually am able to be successful at that. And I'm leaving the screen small so you can understand what I talk about when I talk about scaling in the X and Y coordinates to get it larger. I did get in game, it did freeze, that's what you can expect, but it is a performance improvement, at least in my eyes, because I was actually able to see it. But the big takeaway here is a lot of games' visual looks have been improved with that 1/4 rewrite of the VI pipeline for the Nintendo 64. Rayman 2 is definitely my favorite game of this current batch of tests because it just 100% works and is 100% such a strange, funny game. It's got a huge personality, it's a lot of fun, and it is one of those games that is just synonymous with the Nintendo 64. I definitely prefer the modern Rayman 2D aesthetic, but in 3D here on the Nintendo 64, it is a good look, and again, it is a game that has been vastly improved over the last month on the Nintendo 64 core. It went from not working to working with huge graphical corruption to working with really bad text and scaling to now basically being like you're playing it on a real Nintendo 64, and that is something you definitely can't complain about. But that is the current status of the Nintendo 64 core. I might be back tomorrow with a new one, or maybe Thursday. We'll see what Robert does on the update schedule. But there's been so many improvements over the last 2 weeks, and getting all these VI implementations has been great. But Robert found a little ghost in the machine there, so he went back in and rewrote about 1/4 of it, and it's looking even better than it did before. Short of that, I'll have videos throughout the week, and of course I'll be back with more MiSTer stuff next time something happens. But leave me those game test requests down below, and I will see you guys next time. Go play some Rayman 2. Bye-bye.